Congressional Democrats are now calling for President Trump's removal from office following his extreme threats against Iran. They say the ceasefire isn't enough and are calling for Congress to rein in the Trump administration.
Well, a 2-week ceasefire is insufficient. We need a permanent end to Donald Trump's reckless war of choice. House Democrats have demanded that Speaker Mike Johnson immediately reconvene the House back into session so we can move a war powers.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Yesterday, more than 70 lawmakers in separate posts on social media suggested the president's cabinet must invoke the 25th Amendment and admit he's unfit for office. Congress should pass impeachment articles and vote to convict him, or both. During his first term, he was impeached twice and acquitted.
What's happening, people? Adam is here, so this is happening right now. 265 House members, a bipartisan supermajority, have formally invoked Section 4 of the 25th Amendment, demanding VP Vance and the cabinet officially declare Trump unfit for office. It's not a close vote. Congress has collectively decided he's too erratic and dangerous to hold power one more day. This is genuinely unprecedented in the entire sweep of American constitutional history.
We reached out to state lawmakers, or those who represent California, to pose our accountability question asking, do you support President Trump's actions in Iran or oppose them? Here's what they told us. California Senator Adam Schiff says, quote, Congress must finally reclaim its war power from this increasingly dangerous president before more service members get killed. Congressman David Valadao says, quote, I hope this moment pressures Iran to come to the table and helps to bring this conflict to a close.
The 25th Amendment has been the subject of countless panel discussions and academic papers and cable news segments over the years. It has been whispered about in the corridors of power during previous administrations when presidents faced health crises or periods of intense political turmoil. But it has never been formally invoked at this scale with this level of institutional support. It has never had 265 members of Congress standing behind a resolution demanding its activation. It has never been pushed forward with this kind of overwhelming political momentum that makes resistance nearly impossible. And the reason it is happening now is because the president is visibly and undeniably cracking under the weight of the pressure that has been building from multiple directions simultaneously.
Absolutely, Blaine. And from a lot of Democrats on Capitol Hill who are increasingly calling on their Republican colleagues to either push the cabinet to invoke the 25th Amendment, remove Trump from office, or impeach President Trump. By the way, both those options seem somewhat unlikely. Remember, Republicans are in control of Congress. There were two efforts during President Trump's last term to impeach him. Ultimately, neither of those were successful. No indication that that would be successful as well. But just the rhetoric from Democrats really heating up as they push to put limits on President Trump as this war with Iran stretches on. That fragile ceasefire you just referenced appears to be on thin ice.
The psychological deterioration is no longer something that can be dismissed as media spin or opposition talking points. It is happening in real time, in public view, for every American citizen to witness with their own eyes. Trump is breaking down psychologically, and Congress has decided that waiting for the slow machinery of impeachment to grind forward is simply not an option when the commander-in-chief is demonstrating clear signs of unfitness on a daily basis. The truly staggering detail in all of this, the fact that makes seasoned political observers stop and catch their breath, is the number of Republicans who crossed the aisle to support this removal resolution. 45 members of Trump's own party, 45 Republicans who caucus with the GOP and run under the Republican banner and rely on Republican voters for their electoral survival, voted yes on a resolution declaring that their party's president is unfit for office and should be removed through the most extreme constitutional mechanism available. That kind of defection does not happen in normal political times. That kind of break from party discipline only occurs when the underlying situation has become so catastrophically bad that the normal calculations of political loyalty and partisan solidarity no longer apply. These 45 Republicans have looked at the same evidence that everyone else is seeing, and they have concluded independently that their president cannot continue in office. They have decided that their political futures, their consciences, and their obligation to the Constitution require them to take a stand that will be remembered forever in the history books. Even members of his own coalition, people who campaigned with him and governed with him and defended him through countless previous scandals, are now saying publicly and formally that this man is too dangerous and too unstable to remain in command. Trump's response to this removal push is perhaps the most revealing window into his current mental state. In the span of just a few hours, he posted 30 times on his social media platform, 30 separate messages composed entirely in capital letters, ranting with increasing incoherence about deep state conspiracies and civil war scenarios, and the betrayal of everyone around him. He is specifically targeting J.D. Vance, calling his own hand-picked vice president a complete traitor for even considering signing the 25th Amendment Declaration. He is screaming into the digital void about the possibility of armed conflict if Congress dares to follow through on removing him from office. He is having a complete and total meltdown on a public platform where every word he types is immediately archived and amplified and spread across the entire global information ecosystem. He is making explicit threats of violence while simultaneously losing his grip on observable reality, and that behavior, that exact pattern of erratic and unstable and dangerous conduct, is precisely what Congress is citing as the proof of his unfitness. Trump is providing the evidence against himself in real time, proving through his own words and his own actions that he should not be entrusted with the powers of the presidency for even another hour. The constitutional mechanism itself is remarkably clear and leaves very little room for procedural ambiguity. If the vice president and a majority of the cabinet secretaries formally declare in writing that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, then the vice president immediately becomes acting president. There is no waiting period. There is no opportunity for the president to challenge the declaration before it takes effect. The transfer of power happens instantly upon the transmission of the signed declaration to the Speaker of the House and the President pro tempore of the Senate. J.D. Vance would assume control of the government, Trump would be sidelined from all decision-making authority, and then Congress would have exactly 21 days to vote on whether to make the removal permanent. If 2/3 of both chambers vote to sustain the removal, then Trump is permanently removed and can never return to office. If the supermajority is not reached, then his powers are restored. But the critical point right now is that Congress is demanding immediate action, and J.D. Vance is apparently genuinely considering whether to invoke this mechanism against the president who selected him as his running mate and successor. The fact that Vance is even entertaining this possibility tells you something extraordinarily significant about the internal dynamics of this administration. Trump's own vice president, the person he chose to be a heartbeat away from the presidency, is seriously weighing whether to declare him unfit for office. That means Vance has seen things from his unique vantage point inside the administration that have convinced him the situation is genuinely dire. That means the pressure to invoke the 25th Amendment is not just coming from Congress or from the media or from the opposition party. It is coming from inside the House. It is coming from the people who work closest to Trump and who understand better than anyone else how erratic and unstable his behavior has become. The cabinet math is specific and surprisingly achievable. 8 out of the 15 cabinet secretaries combined with the vice president would be sufficient to trigger the mechanism. 8 people out of 15 is not some impossible threshold that can never be reached. It is a simple majority of the cabinet plus 1, and reports indicate that some of Trump's own appointed officials, people he personally selected and the Senate confirmed, actually believe he should be removed from power. Some of the individuals closest to Trump in the entire government, people who attend meetings with him and receive his directives and witness his decision-making process up close, have concluded that he is unfit to continue serving as president. That is an extraordinary fact that speaks volumes about the severity of the crisis. The specific incidents that Congress is citing as concrete evidence of unfitness are devastating when assembled together as a cumulative record. Caroline Leavitt collapsed on live television during a White House press briefing, an incident that speaks to the chaotic and psychologically abusive environment created by an erratic and unstable commander-in-chief. The Epstein witness fainted in federal court while testifying about cover-ups and obstruction that were allegedly ordered directly by Trump, providing sworn testimony that links the president personally to criminal obstruction of justice. A leaked Department of Justice memo from Attorney General Pam Bondi documented Trump explicitly ordering the redaction of names belonging to his associates from sensitive materials, creating a paper trail of presidential obstruction. Kash Patel was caught lying under oath about unauthorized investigations, evidence that the FBI director committed perjury in service of protecting the president. Each of these incidents individually would be damaging. Taken together as a pattern, they present a portrait of an administration in complete ethical and functional collapse, with the president himself at the center of the corruption. Congress is looking at this cascade of failures and scandals and saying that the normal constitutional mechanisms are insufficient to address the emergency. The multiple public collapses, the documented obstruction, the perjury committed under oath, the erratic behavior on social media, the explicit threats of violence against political opponents, the complete psychological meltdowns occurring in full public view. This is not the portrait of a normal, functional president who happens to have some political problems. This is the portrait of someone who is demonstrably and clearly unable to perform the basic duties of the office, and Congress has decided that the 25th Amendment is the appropriate tool for addressing that unfitness immediately, rather than waiting for impeachment proceedings that could drag on for months. The bipartisan nature of this push is what gives it such extraordinary political legitimacy. This is not a Democratic coup or a partisan witch hunt. This is 45 Republicans joining with the overwhelming majority of Democrats to say that the situation has become untenable and that action must be taken now. Those 45 Republicans have independently assessed the evidence and concluded that their loyalty to the Constitution and to the country outweighs whatever loyalty they might owe to a president who is visibly unraveling. The political pressure is coming from across the entire spectrum, from progressives and moderates and conservatives who have all arrived at the same conclusion through their own independent reasoning. That kind of consensus is vanishingly rare in American politics, and when it emerges, it carries a moral and political weight that cannot be dismissed. The timeline for what happens next is compressed and urgent by design. Congress is not suggesting that the cabinet take its time and deliberate for weeks. Congress is demanding immediate action because the situation is being treated as an emergency requiring emergency measures. The push is for Vance and the cabinet to act now, to sign the declaration this week, to remove Trump from power before he can cause additional damage that might be irreversible. The sense of urgency is palpable because every day that Trump remains in control of the nuclear codes and the military and the executive branch is a day when his deteriorating mental state could lead to decisions that endanger national security or even human civilization itself. Trump's response to all of this is proving every single argument that Congress is making. The 30 posts in a matter of hours, the all-caps screaming, the incoherent rants about civil war, the threats directed at his own vice president, the complete abandonment of any pretense of presidential demeanor. He is demonstrating through his actual conduct the very unfitness that Congress is citing as the grounds for removal. It is a self-defeating spiral of the most dramatic kind, where every attempt to fight back against the removal push provides additional evidence for why the removal is necessary. The approval numbers are reflecting this collapse in real time, with polling showing support cratering to historic lows in the low 30s. The financial markets are panicking, with major indices dropping sharply on the news of the 25th Amendment push as investors confront the reality that the American government is fundamentally unstable and that the president might actually be removed from office through an unprecedented constitutional process. J.D. Vance is the fulcrum on which this entire situation pivots. Everything comes down to whether he is willing to sign the declaration. If Vance decides to act, if he puts his name on the document declaring Trump unfit, then the mechanism is triggered and there is no stopping it. Trump is out immediately, Vance becomes acting president, and the entire balance of power shifts in an instant. And the report suggests that Vance is genuinely considering it. He is apparently weighing the evidence and the political calculus and his own constitutional obligations. He is thinking seriously about whether the president who selected him is still capable of discharging the duties of the office. That tells you that the situation inside the White House must be even worse than it appears from the outside, because the vice president has access to information and intelligence and direct observations that the public never sees. If Vance is concerned enough to consider invoking the 25th Amendment, then the reality of Trump's condition must be truly alarming. The cabinet members are facing intense pressure from every conceivable direction. Congress is pressuring them to sign the declaration and fulfill what many lawmakers see as their constitutional duty. Their own staffs are terrified, working in an environment of constant chaos and uncertainty, and many are privately urging their bosses to take action. Business leaders and market analysts are calling with warnings about economic catastrophe if the instability continues. And perhaps most powerfully, their own consciences are weighing on them. These cabinet secretaries took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution, not to protect and defend the president. If they genuinely believe that the president is unfit, then they have a constitutional obligation to do something about it. They have an obligation to invoke the mechanism that the framers of the 25th Amendment provided for exactly this kind of situation. The Secretary of Defense is in a particularly agonizing position because he controls the military chain of command and has to think about what is best for national security in a moment of profound uncertainty. The Secretary of State has to consider America's standing in the world and the damage being done to alliances and diplomatic relationships with every erratic presidential statement. The Treasury Secretary has to think about the markets and the economy and the potential for a financial crisis triggered by political instability. Each of them has to weigh their personal loyalty to the president against their institutional responsibilities and their historical legacy. And some of them, apparently, have decided that the balance tips decisively in favor of removal. The fundamental difference between the 25th Amendment and impeachment is what makes this push so strategically significant. Impeachment is a slow process that requires multiple steps and offers the president numerous opportunities to defend himself and delay the proceedings. Throughout an impeachment trial, the president remains in office with full control of the executive branch, including the ability to issue pardons and direct the Justice Department and command the military. The 25th Amendment, by contrast, is immediate. The moment the vice president and the cabinet transmit their declaration, the transfer of power occurs. Trump would be stripped of authority instantly, with no opportunity to block the process or delay its implementation. He would be a former president in terms of his actual powers, even as the legal and political battles continued to rage around the question of permanent removal. That immediacy is why Congress is choosing this path. They want Trump out of power right now, not after weeks of impeachment hearings and floor debates and procedural maneuvering. Once the declaration is signed and Vance becomes acting president, Trump has one avenue of recourse. He can transmit his own written declaration to Congress asserting that he is actually fit and capable of serving. If he does that, his powers are temporarily restored. But then Congress has exactly 21 days to vote on the question of permanent removal, and if 2/3 of both chambers vote to sustain the removal, Trump is out permanently with no further recourse. The 21-day clock creates urgency on all sides. Congress cannot delay or stall. The decision must be made quickly, and the vote must be held before the deadline expires. With 45 Republicans already on record supporting removal, the possibility that Congress could reach the 2/3 threshold is very real. The House would need 290 votes, and the Senate would need 67. Those are high bars, but they are not insurmountable given the bipartisan consensus that is already forming around the conclusion that Trump is unfit. Trump will not go quietly, regardless of how the process unfolds. He will fight with every tool at his disposal and many tools that are not legitimately at his disposal. He will claim that the 25th Amendment is being applied unconstitutionally. He will argue that the cabinet did not follow proper procedures. He will threaten to fire any cabinet member who signs the declaration, although once they have signed and transmitted it, the constitutional mechanism is already in motion and firing them may not undo what has been done. He will file lawsuits and seek emergency injunctions and appeal every adverse ruling up through the federal courts. He will demand that his supporters take to the streets. He will use his platform to attack the legitimacy of the entire process. And the result will be a period of constitutional chaos unlike anything the country has experienced in its modern history, where the question of who is actually the legitimate president of the United States is contested and uncertain. But during all of that chaos, during all of the legal battles and political fights and street protests, Vance will be in control of the government. He will have the nuclear codes and command authority over the military. He will be able to issue executive orders and direct the operations of the federal bureaucracy. He will be the person to whom foreign leaders address their communications and with whom they negotiate and coordinate. Trump will be on the outside looking in, fighting to reclaim a power that has already been transferred. And that reality, that fundamental shift in the locus of authority, is what makes the 25th Amendment such a devastating tool. It does not wait for the outcome of the political fight. It resolves the question of who is in charge on an interim basis immediately, and then leaves the permanent resolution to Congress under a tight deadline. The historical significance of this moment cannot be overstated. The 25th Amendment was ratified decades ago in the aftermath of a presidential assassination that raised profound questions about presidential succession and disability. Its Section 4, the provision being invoked now, was designed for a scenario that the framers hoped would never arise. It was a safeguard of last resort, a break glass in case of emergency provision that would only be used if a president was genuinely incapable of discharging the duties of the office, but refused to acknowledge that incapacity. Every previous administration faced moments when pundits and critics speculated about whether the 25th Amendment might be invoked, but none ever reached the point where Congress formally demanded its activation with a bipartisan supermajority. This is new territory. This is constitutional history being written in real time. The Republican Party is now fractured in ways that will take years to heal, if healing is even possible. 45 members voted to remove their own party's president. The coalition that Trump built and sustained through sheer force of personality is splintering as that personality visibly deteriorates in public view. The divisions between Trump loyalists and institutional conservatives, between populists and traditionalists, between those who see the president as the embodiment of the movement and those who see him as a liability to be shed, are now formalized in the congressional record. The midterm elections, whatever else they might be about, will be in part a referendum on this fracture and on the future direction of the Republican Party. Candidates will have to decide whether to align themselves with the removed president or with the constitutional process that removed him, and that decision will shape the party's identity for a generation. The country is facing a constitutional stress test of a magnitude not seen since the Civil War or the Watergate crisis. The mechanisms that the framers designed to handle executive incapacity are being activated in real time, and the question of whether they will function as intended is still open. The system is being pushed to its absolute limits, and the resilience of American democracy is being tested in ways that will be studied by historians and political scientists for decades to come. The outcome of this process will shape not just the remainder of this presidential term, but the understanding of presidential power and accountability for all future administrations. If the 25th Amendment works as designed, it will establish a precedent that no president is above the constitutional order. If it fails, it will demonstrate the limits of constitutional safeguards in the face of a determined executive. Either way, the republic will not be the same on the other side. What happens next will unfold rapidly. The cabinet will have to decide whether to sign the declaration, and the pressure to do so is immense and growing by the hour. Trump's psychological state will continue to deteriorate as the walls close in and the reality of his situation becomes impossible to deny. Vance will have to make the most consequential decision of his political career, a decision that will define his legacy regardless of which way he chooses. Congress will have to prepare for the 21-day clock and the vote on permanent removal that will follow any cabinet declaration. And the American people will have to watch all of it unfold, bearing witness to a constitutional drama of historic proportions playing out on their screens and in their institutions. The endgame has begun, and the presidency of Donald Trump is teetering on the edge of an unprecedented and irreversible conclusion. The moment the signatures are affixed to the declaration, the transfer of power is complete, and nothing will ever be the same again.